One Jewish family. A locked ghetto in 18th century Frankfurt. Zero political rights. And yet, within 2 generations, they controlled the finances of kings, funded entire wars, and built the most powerful banking dynasty the world has ever seen. How did it all begin, and how can their story inspire you? There is only one way to find out, and that is by watching this video to the end. Let us go back to the Judengasse. That is the Jewish alley in Frankfurt, Germany, in the 18th century. The Judengasse was not a neighborhood, it was a cage. The city confined its entire Jewish population to a single, narrow, overcrowded street. Jewish residents could not own land outside the ghetto. They could not work most jobs. They could not even walk freely through the city on Sundays or Christian holidays. The system pushed them in one direction: money lending. And one man decided that if the world was going to lock him into finance, he was going to make finance his empire. His name was Mayor Amschel Rothschild, born on February 23, 1744. The family name itself tells the whole story. Rothschild comes from the German Zum Roten Shield, meaning at the sign of the red shield. That was the name of their house on the Judengasse. A red shield hung at their doorstep. From that red shield, a dynasty was born that would one day lend money to kings and shape the fate of nations. Mayer started as a dealer in rare coins. Small operation, big vision. He caught the attention of Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hesse, one of the wealthiest men in all of Europe. By 1769, Mayer was appointed as court agent, managing Wilhelm's finances. From that one relationship, he built trust, credibility, and connections that no amount of money could buy outright. He also had 10 children with his wife Ghetto, 5 of whom were sons. And those 5 sons were about to change everything. But how exactly did 5 young men from a Frankfurt ghetto turn one banking house into an international financial network that outpaced entire governments? The answer to that is wilder than anything you'd expect. Stay with me. The 5 arrows, the most brilliant business strategy in history. Mayor Amschel Rothschild did something that no banker before him had ever pulled off on this scale. He deployed his 5 sons across the 5 most important financial capitals in Europe, each one running an independent branch that operated as a unified family unit. Amschel stayed in Frankfurt to manage the home base. Nathan went to London. Salomon set up in Vienna. Carl built the Naples operation. James took Paris. This was not just business diversity. This was a communications and financial revolution. The 5 brothers wrote to each other constantly, sometimes multiple times per day, in a private code that no one outside the family could crack. They shared intelligence on markets, governments, political shifts, and commodity prices before anyone else could react. In an era where information traveled by horse and ship, the Rothschilds had essentially built the world's first private real-time financial intelligence network. Their coat of arms captures this perfectly. 5 arrows clutched in a fist, drawn directly from Psalm 127. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. The family motto reads Concordia, Integritas, Industria, Unity, Integrity, Industry. That was not just branding. That was the actual operating manual. They kept everything in the family, shared all profits across branches, and kept the true size of their wealth in absolute secrecy. And that secrecy? That strategy? It was about to be tested on the biggest stage history had ever seen, because Napoleon Bonaparte was reshaping Europe with an iron fist, and the Rothschilds were watching with very close attention, financing empires and the legend of Waterloo. The Napoleonic Wars, which raged across Europe from 1792 to 1815, were devastating for millions of people. For the Rothschilds, they were a defining opportunity. The family financed both sides of the conflict, providing loans to warring states and managing the transfer of payments across blockades Napoleon himself tried to enforce. While the Emperor of France attempted to shut down British trade across the continent, the Rothschilds moved money through smuggling networks and legal trading channels in wheat, cotton, arms, and colonial goods. They were operating right in the middle of history's most dramatic power struggle, and they were making a fortune doing it. The London branch, run by Nathan Mayer Rothschild, became the most powerful of the 5. Nathan helped finance the British Army's campaigns in Portugal and Spain under the Duke of Wellington. He managed the logistics of moving gold across enemy lines to fund British allies on the continent. The Rothschild London Bank took a central role in managing the subsidies the British government transferred to its European coalition partners during the war. Then came June 1815. the Battle of Waterloo. This is the part of the Rothschild story that lives in financial legend. Nathan's courier network brought him news of Wellington's victory over Napoleon before the British government itself received the official report. What Nathan did with that information remains one of the most debated episodes in financial history. He bought British government bonds at low prices, knowing that the news of victory would cause prices to surge. When the official news arrived and markets spiked, Nathan Rothschild made a killing. By 1818, the London branch was already arranging a £5 million loan to the Prussian government, cementing the family's position as the premier sovereign debt financiers in the world. War made them rich, but peace made them legendary, because the Rothschilds were not done building, not even close. The Industrial Revolution was coming, and they were about to put their stamp on the infrastructure of the modern world: Suez, railways, and diamonds. As the 19th century moved forward, the Rothschilds moved with it. They were not the kind of family to sit on gold and admire it. They put capital to work at a scale no private family had ever attempted before. James de Rothschild in Paris financed a significant portion of the French railway system, one of the largest infrastructure undertakings of the 19th century. Under his leadership, the French branch became dominant across rail, coal, ironworking, and metallurgy. The family also backed major railway projects across Austria and across the continent, effectively underwriting the physical backbone of European industrial expansion. Then in 1875, Lionel de Rothschild in London made one of the most consequential deals in the history of global trade. The British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli needed to purchase Egypt's shares in the Suez Canal Company, which controlled one of the most strategically important waterways on Earth. The British government needed £4 million fast. Parliament was not in session. There was no time for a public loan. Disraeli sent word to Lionel de Rothschild. The Rothschild Bank provided the funds immediately, backed only by the British government's promise to repay. It was the kind of transaction only the Rothschilds could execute. Britain became a major shareholder in the Suez Canal, and the family cemented its role as the private banker to the British Empire. The Rothschild Bank also funded Cecil Rhodes in developing the British South Africa Company, and from that relationship came a dominant stake in De Beers, the diamond mining giant that controlled South African diamond production and shaped the global diamond trade for over a century. At this point, the Rothschilds were deeply embedded in the infrastructure of empires: railways, canals, diamonds, oil, metals. They were not just bankers. They were the circulatory system of global capitalism. But something else was true about this family that the history books often overlook. And this is the part that hits different. Philanthropy, the family that gave back. The Rothschilds grew up in the Frankfurt Ghetto with a concept called tzedakah, a Jewish principle of social justice and material support for those in need. That value did not disappear when the wealth arrived. It scaled with it. During the Irish potato famine of the 1840s, which killed over 1 million people and displaced millions more, the Rothschilds provided significant funding through the British Relief Association to support famine relief efforts. The British branch built hospitals, schools, synagogues, and shelters for the needy across Europe. Nathan Mayer's wife, Hannah, helped fund Jewish free schools across Britain. The family's collective donations of artworks to galleries across Europe represent the largest such contribution by any family in history. The Rothschilds spent decades pushing for Jewish civil rights across Europe. Lionel de Rothschild became the first Jewish member of the British Parliament in 1858, after an 1-year battle in which he refused to take the oath on a Christian Bible. Their wealth helped dismantle discriminatory barriers in finance and politics across the continent. The British branch also played a direct role in the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which expressed British government support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. All of that, and yet the hardest chapter of the Rothschild story is still ahead, because the 20th century brought something no amount of money could fully stop. And how this family survived it is the most powerful part of this entire story. Do not touch that screen. And then came the Nazis. By the late 19th century, the Rothschild network had already absorbed some setbacks. Italian unification effectively shut down the Naples branch, as the new Italian state no longer needed the family's financial role in what had been a fragmented kingdom. The rise of joint stock banks and large commercial banking consortia across Europe began to chip away at the family's formerly unmatched monopoly on sovereign lending. The Rothschilds were still enormously wealthy, but they were no longer the singular financial power they had been at their peak in the 1840s and 1850s. But none of that compared to what Adolf Hitler's regime did to them. The Rothschilds were not just wealthy Jews in Nazi Europe. They were the symbolic target. The Nazi regime used them as the face of an anti-Semitic propaganda campaign that blamed Jewish financial power for Germany's ills. The 1940 Nazi propaganda film, Der ewige Jude, The Eternal Jew, incorporated footage from a 1934 Hollywood film about the Rothschilds without permission and twisted it into hateful propaganda. Meanwhile, on the ground, the Nazis moved to seize Rothschild assets with ruthless efficiency. When the Nazis annexed Austria in 1938, Louis von Rothschild was arrested in Vienna. His release cost the family their entire Austrian banking empire, including iron and steel works, representing a massive share of Austria's industrial capacity. The Austrian branch, one of the original 5 arrows, was destroyed. In France, the Nazis seized the Paris operations. The family fled to New York and built again from nothing. After the war, the French government returned control of the Paris business to the family in 1945. Anthony de Rothschild rebuilt the British branch from the ground up. In France, David and Eric de Rothschild spent decades after the post-war era rebuilding their operations, eventually merging the French and British businesses into a unified global group that today operates under the name Rothschild & Co., with offices from Milan to Mexico City, Jakarta to Johannesburg, and Sydney to Sao Paulo. After everything, the Rothschilds diversified into wine. Baron Philippe de Rothschild turned Chateau Mouton Rothschild into one of the world's most celebrated vineyards. They also owned Chateau Lafite Rothschild, one of the most expensive bottles on earth. A family that started in a locked ghetto, survived Napoleon, bankrolled empires, and outlasted Nazis, came out the other side making wine worth thousands a bottle. That is not wealth, that is legacy. If this story hit you the way it hit me when I first went deep into it, share it. Send it to someone who thinks they know history. Drop a comment telling me which part of the Rothschild saga surprised you the most. Subscribe if you are new here, because this channel goes deep on the families, the decisions, and the defining moments that shape the world you are living in right now. Hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next one. We have got more stories like this coming, and trust me, some of them are even wilder. One last thing. The Rothschilds are still out there, still operating, still building. Rothschild & Co. reported annual revenues of nearly 2 billion euros in recent years. The family that began at a red shield on the Judengasse is still, centuries later, in the business of shaping how money moves through the world. That is a legacy. That is history. That is the Rothschilds. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. See you in the next video.